Hello everyone, it's been a while, but there's some big breaking news that I want to talk about, and I'm going to try and be a bit more active. But let's just get into this one. So, the US, or Trump specifically, has authorized, well, he did authorize the killing of a Iranian top general, as in, this is the big boss essentially of Iran in terms of the military, Soleimani. This US general here, Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Miley, was claiming that he knows 100% that Soleimani authorized the attacks on a US base. He's offered no proof, but he's going to claim it's classified. So whatever. Do I believe him? It's possible because the group that did attack the base are backed by Iran, but they're not going to know all of the group's activities, but they're going to know relatively what they're about. So, he probably didn't know in advance, but I doubt he cares much. Most of these groups that are armed are there to just create discord within the region, just to create problems. Yeah, that sums that up. But yeah, Iran does back a lot of terrorist groups within the Middle East, just like Saudi Arabia does as well. And it's not about whataboutism. It's just to say that you can't attack Iran for doing these things without also attacking Saudi Arabia, who are one of the US's biggest allies. But anyways, there's a really interesting point within this article. And so in the end, Mr. Mulroy, so Mick Mulroy, an ABC contributor, he's saying that it's going to be difficult for Iran not to retaliate, and that's important. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But what the US has done is essentially they've swung for Iran here. They've attacked the top the top Iranian general. He's a government official, and it would be kind of like if a foreign country killed one of our top generals in the UK, or even the defense secretary. I don't know who our defense secretary is at the moment. Give me 1 second. See who it is. Ben Wallace. So it'd be the equivalent of them murdering Ben Wallace on foreign soil as well, because Soleimani was killed in Iraq, and obviously the man's Iranian, and so Iraq aren't happy about this either because it violates Iraqi sovereignty. But the Iraqi government are in a really bad and weak position at the moment, and I'll explain more about that in a few minutes. But so what Mr. Mulroy is saying here, the ABC contributor, is saying that, look, they might spend some time mourning it, but they're going to be after blood here, and the whoever the new Iranian top general is, they're going to be expecting this guy to do damage essentially. So they're going to be expecting him to throw something back here, because you don't do things like this. It's an assassination. You've killed a top general, regardless of a lot of the bad things done. I don't have a lot of sympathy for the Iranian government. I don't care for their backward views. I hope that the younger population actually, do revolt, or at least have a cultural revolution within the country, because there are a lot of older, religious, boring people that hold younger generations back. But anyways, one of the ways Iran could retaliate is via Hezbollah, who are based in Lebanon, I believe, and they've got 100,000 rockets that are ready to go. It's going to be interesting to see what Iran does now, because they do generally operate through proxies, but there are some other things to talk about. So this situation has been simmering for a while, with Iran complaining about attacks on its oil tankers. So this was in October of last year, and also there was a Japanese oil tanker that was attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, which is right by Iran. People immediately accused Iran of doing it. I wasn't sure because there wasn't enough evidence of who did it. With the US claiming it was Iran saying, bro, this wasn't us, and now Iran, and then an Iranian oil tanker got attacked. So it's interesting to see that. So it's been simmering, but here we've kind of hit a rolling boil at this point, with a top general being killed. And so, relations between Iran and the US have never been great, with the 1953 Iranian coup that was led by US Special Ops, I believe. They got rid of, I think he was a popular Iranian leader, Mossadegh. And that was because he nationalised the Iranian oil, and obviously the UK and the US were not happy about that, because then the oil would be sold and the money would be used to benefit the Iranian people, rather than giving cheap exports to countries who are scumbags, basically. The US and the UK, especially at that time. I'm not saying they're angels now, but at this time they were not great, to say the least. So yeah, you can argue, Iran started it, but realistically, it was the Americans started in '53. And I'm not justifying anything that Iran has done since then, but relations have been shaky to say the least. So if we go here, and one of the goals, I guess, figuring out Trump's endgame is something we'll have to talk about at the end. But Trump reauthorized sanctions against Iran after Obama revoked them after the Iran nuclear deal that Obama helped to get done. And so, US sanctions have impacted Iran massively. And the point of sanctions these kind of sanctions are to basically create massive problems within a country and cause a revolution, essentially, a revolt within. And so the US have sanctioned things like medicine. Like who does that? That's a scumbag move. It really is a scumbag move, because then you're essentially letting innocent, people die, because this won't impact the rich people as much, because they'll find a way of getting it, as they always have, but poorer people won't. And so patients in Iran suffering from special and rare diseases such as cancer and epilepsy, dependent on imported medicine, are therefore suffering from the negative effects of the sanctions. Do you think you're going to get a lot of support within Iran doing this? But anyways, do you think that you're going to get a lot of support doing this? Not really. So it's not the sanctions. It depends. I mean, you can get the thing you want out of sanctions, because you can essentially get a revolt, but at the same time, you could harden resolve against the country that have done the sanctioning. So yeah, it just depends. And there were problems within Iran as well. There were violent protests, and there were crackdowns of it. The worst unrest in 40 years, according to the New York Times. So Iran is experiencing the deadliest political unrest since the Islamic Revolution 40 years ago, with at least 180 people killed. And so the New York Times have linked this directly with the sanctions. And so, yeah, Trump essentially, he would have gotten what he wanted from this had he let the situation go on without killing this the Iranian general, because now it's gonna harder resolve against the West, because those people who want more Western values, when they say, we want to have more freedom, those people who want to be more Western, they're going to be told, you want to be like the country who killed our general, this guy who's seen as a hero within the country. It's not going to help. You're going to create a lot more bitterness within a country, and you're going to create a lot more a bigger factional divide, and you're going to create a lot more anger about things like this, where they're going to blame the US for this, rightly so, because they've been sanctioned by the US. And so maybe that anger won't be aimed at the government who have pursued nuclear weapons, and that's the reason for the sanctions. But realistically, it's because Trump doesn't like the fact that Obama got the nuclear deal signed, and he got a lot of support for that. What he really wants is a Trump nuclear deal, and I'll do a separate video on what Iran should have done to kind of avoid all of this, rather than what they did. Essentially, it was Saiyan pride that got in the way, and I'll do a separate video on Saiyan pride as well, so subscribe for that. But anyways, so we can see that the sanctions were doing what they intended to do, which is damage the country economically and cause massive amounts of unrest. But Trump played himself by doing this. It also further creates problems between Iran and Iraq, because Iran and Iraq are becoming quite close recently, with Iran helping deal with ISIS as well, because they were invited in by Iraq to help deal with the problems of ISIS, and they've become big trade partners. And I wouldn't be surprised if Iraq pursued a nuclear energy program similar to what Iran has, and they've become, Iran is Iraq's biggest trading partner, which is crazy considering that it wasn't more than 20 years ago they were bitter enemies. They were I think the Gulf Wars were between those two countries specifically, and now they're biggest trading partners, which is crazy how far they've come in a short space of time. And that's mainly because of, as Wikipedia puts here, the war against ISIS, and the fact that they're both Shia governments, essentially in a world, well, not in a world of, but around Sunni governments essentially. So that's quite interesting in itself. But this relationship will become strained quite a bit, because you've killed an Iranian general on Iraqi soil. So we'll have to see what happens there, if there are any strains in relationships. But Nouri al-Maliki, who was vice president, he's he's part of the Shia government, which is the one in charge of Iraq at the moment. They have their own problems. However, it's quite interesting to see how far they've come. But I digress. Trump does cite the fact that the embassy attacks were the fault of Iran, saying that it was Iranian proxies. But the relationship between Trump and Iraq has struggled a bit. Trump has blamed the embassy attack on Iran because of support for the militia that apparently led it. Many citizens criticise Trump for him not engaging with Iraqi leadership. So it's quite unclear. Attacking an embassy is essentially an act of war, because the way embassies are seen are they're a piece of land that belong to the country that the embassy belongs to. And so you could try and argue that Iran backing this terrorist group essentially backed an act of war against America, but it'd be quite hard to do that because it's not, you'd be hard pressed to prove that Iran authorized this. But this is how Iran typically operate, through proxies. And just as other countries do, it's the smart way to do it. You give people weapons and some money, and they go and fight the people on your behalf, essentially mercenaries. But they're not just mercenaries for money, but they have a cause. Whether it's right or wrong, that's dependent on who sees them. But I'd never support attacking an embassy. It's well defended. It's one that I think it's the most defended embassy in the world, which is no surprise about. But yeah, it's not a good situation between Iran and the US at the moment. And Pompeo is talking absolute nonsense on Twitter as usual, saying that Iran assisted the travel of the 9/11 terrorists, 10 out of 12, when there were, as pointed out here, there were 19 terrorists, not 12. And why would a Shia theocracy help agents of a theocratic Sunni group? And literally this is the same argument that they used against Iraq. And so this person here put Soleimani was plotting with Saddam Hussein too fat, which obviously is a joke, because those two were bitter enemies, or they would have been bitter enemies, because obviously here you have the brutal dictator of the former dictator of Iraq, who had multiple wars with Iran, and he would have been one of the combatants against Iraq during the war. So it's quite a funny joke from these two here. And there are arguments that Iran does back the Taliban as well, which is quite interesting because they're a Sunni terrorist group, but there is the point that the Taliban are the lesser of two evils between the US and the Taliban, if that makes sense. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is never a safe bet. But yeah, making this move is so stupid to be the equivalent of killing, the UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, or I think the US counterpart would be Mark Esper. And so this is an act of war. Let's not get it twisted now. And Iran they can't directly strike back because Trump will fight them. But the thing is, what is Trump's endgame here, really? What does he want, and what do the neocons want? That's the question. Because what Trump wants is to essentially redo the Iran nuclear deal, but put Trump's name on it. So it won't be the Obama nuclear deal, it will be the Trump nuclear deal. Kind of like what he's done with North Korea, and I'll do a separate video on that. And Iran didn't want to play ball like North Korea did, and that's essentially sparked this situation. And there'll be a lot of yes men within Trump's cabinet. You've got Mike Pompeo, who was a big cheerleader for the war on terror. And so yeah, Trump's got a lot of yes men around him. If John Bolton was there, he'd be celebrating like a madman with that demon mustache. So yeah, I think I've done my best to sum up the situation here, but I don't know what Iran does next. But they're gonna be put in a situation where if they do not retaliate, then they're gonna look massively cowardly on the world stage. And if they do retaliate, it's gonna be used as evidence against Iran in future. But Iran does have China and Russia to back it. So if Trump does invade, even if Trump takes out the Iranian government, right, and just like they did in Iraq, right, look at the size difference between Iraq here and Iran, right? Imagine trying to keep control over this land, which the US struggled to do massively, even with the UK to back them, right, and NATO, right? Look how big this piece of land is compared to this one. I think Iran is 2/3 bigger. It's massive. There's no way you can control all of that. So all you can do is create power struggles within Iran. So this is not a smart move. Going to war with Iran is not a good idea. I care very little for the Iranian government, but be intelligent here and really figure out what you want to do, because Trump's endgame is just not going to work. But anyways, I think I'll leave it there. But tell me what you guys think. Is this the beginning of World War III, which is trending on Twitter? I don't think so. Not yet anyways. But I think that this situation is quite volatile, and I'll be doing my best to cover it as best I can. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one if we're not all dead.